anything to be
Can
changed?
we do that again?
Yeah, go. Once we vote on it.
Any additions, subtractions, or corrections? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next up is our first public input. Remind people when you come to the mic, state your name, and then Bart's it hopefully. And it's 3 minutes in a mic, total of 15 minutes, and this first public input is for anything that is on the agenda. Seeing none, I'll close this public input. All right, blazing right through here today. All right, first up, BES Administration Report, Principals Report. Howie.
Good evening. So it's a fairly quiet January so far. Enrollment report is attached. We've gained 4 students since last month. Back in December, we held a Title I family night where we had kiddos and their families come to the library, and they were fed pizza, and they had different games and activities that they could play, and we had 18 families that participated. The ice fishing trip is scheduled for next month, and we're basically maxed out at 45 kids, so that's going to be a great experience for some of our kids to get out with Mr. Bailey and New Hampshire Fishing Game, and several of our staff are chaperoning too, so that'll be a great experience for them. So we kind of did an initiative when we came back to school after Christmas break, and we were calling it a January reset. We had assemblies for different grade levels and discussed some of the different expectations that different groups need to work on. So for example, in K2 we talked about sort of their lunchroom expectations, because we saw that, voices can be a little bit loud. Sometimes there's, running in the cafeteria. So that's one area that we really targeted on with our K2 kids. And for example, our 5 through 8 kids, we just talked about basically just tried to reset some classroom expectations of coming in calmly, finding your seat, getting right to work on, the bell ringer or the do now or whatever the teacher has right, as you get started, so they can start class. And from what I have seen so far, I think it paid some dividends, so I think it was just kind of good to take a look at our expectations, and it's good for teachers to do this too, right? Because they may set some expectations in September, and then all of a sudden we get to November, December, and there's some things popping up that they think, well, maybe I could address this. So I think it was good for the entire school to kind of have a little bit of a reset. When Mike Anderson came in last week, he held meetings with all of our grade level teams to discuss the reset and how it's going. And when he reported back to us at the end of the day, he reported back that a majority of the staff came back in a much better place than they were the last time he talked to them. So he was happy to report that, the reset and just kind of going over these things, added to the positive climate of the school. A couple things we talked about going forward was a constitutional convention, and this is where all the kids in the building, they collectively set up some expectations in some of the common areas of the school. So for example, what does it mean to act appropriately in the hallway, in the cafeteria, things like that. And he had done this with the school right before COVID, and it was a big success. And basically the kids come together, and individually in classrooms, they sort of talk about, okay, what are the things that we really value here as a school? How do you want the school to look? And then on like chart paper, the kids write these ideas down, and then one student from each class, they kind of, all the kids in the school from K-8, they get together in the gym, and then they sort of sort these things are in common, these things are in common, and that, you know, once they get all their ideas out, then they kind of come up with some expectations, and the idea is that the entire school contributes to how do we want, Barnstead to be, how do we want, our school environment to be, so we're gonna be looking at that in February. And then we also talked about, having Mike do some collegial coaching where groups of teachers, he trains them on how to give good feedback and corrective feedback, and these groups of teachers go in and observe each other. So it's less of an evaluative process as opposed to myself or Ms. Brooks going in where it's more evaluative. This is more, it's a little bit more relaxed where, and it's a little bit more trusting, and, the teacher doesn't feel like they're being necessarily evaluated strictly for how can you improve your teaching practices. So that's something that he's looking to work with our staff going forward. Our discipline numbers pretty much remain the same as did our student support team numbers. So in January, we had 84 instant referrals, and our student support team saw 4 new students for initial referrals, and we discussed 22 students who were in progress monitoring. And I will say it was the last 2 SST meetings that we had, so we have them every Friday. And when we've done our progress monitoring, there was a significant amount of kids who we found that the supports that we have put in place are working. So it was good to kind of hear that teachers reported back, things are going better, or their office referrals have decreased. So, it was a good couple of SST meetings to kind of hear that the work we're doing with some of these kids are paying dividends. So, and I am working on getting setting up just kind of comparison, Jason, of last year to this year, and just kind of see where we fall. So, and that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy.
What do you think of the comparison, next meeting, or?
Hopefully, yeah.
Good to see this week. Sounds like it's going well.
Yeah.
A lot of effort into it, so.
Yeah.
Any questions, Principal?
No questions, but just a comment. My son is helping with the ice fishing trip, and he could not be more excited. So, especially to see that there's that many kids interested in learning, and he tells me every day, like, the weather is like really in our favor, and we're gonna have awesome ice. So he's super
Especially
excited.
after this weekend.
Yeah. So I think it's great that he's been teaching fishing at Tail Store for a while now, but the ice fishing hasn't always worked out. I mean, it's so like weather contingent, but it's just exciting to see that there's 45 kids that are interested, because not everybody wants to go outside and freeze on the ice. So.
And one thing we've kind of kicked around the idea is having days in conjunction with our ski club days where it's like an outdoor learning experience. So, we'll have a group of kids that'll go, we'll have our skiers that'll go, and then maybe we'll have a group that go ice fishing, and then maybe we have a group of kids who wanna go skating, once they get the, snowshoeing. All these things, so that's something that we're trying to work, so, we're gonna, Cam is gonna do this trip, just kinda get us started, and then obviously there's a lot of interest, so, that's something we may look for this year, but it's definitely something for next year we'd like to do, is have these days, just kind of outdoor learning days for.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, it's so cold out, and like, if you live here, you might as well try to find things to enjoy.
And my transition to them going to high school and getting a bass fishing team, so.
Yes, yeah. True.
Well, thank you very much. Next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, then again.
Yeah, that's right. So just something that came across today, actually, some of you may have seen that the Barnstead Farmers Market has sort of voted to cease and desist. Somebody reached out to me who's been involved with it in the past. I think he's a vendor. He said he was on the board of the farmers market, and he basically just approached me. He wants to keep it going, so he asked if the space between the baseball field and the soccer field, the parking lot, would be available spring through summer and then into early fall. I said I would, definitely look into it, and I thought it would be a good tie-in, where Cam Bailey has his greenhouse going up, so maybe we can tie in, some of the stuff that we grow here to sell at the farmer's market, and if not sell, just at least it would be a good showcase for our kids, here's some of the stuff that they've grown and whatnot, so, I just wanted to kind of bring that to people's attention, and,
I think you need to vet out what our exposure on insurance would be. If there gonna be any costs, and is there any issues with any parking or anything else with the construction going on.
yeah.
I think I need to flush those kind of things out. Anybody else? I think, I'd like to see what his plan is.
Yeah.
What does he envision?
Mhm. Yeah, I told him I'd float it by, you guys to see what your preliminary thoughts were, and then
Yeah,
I'd
and I
come
think
back
like
with
what
some more
does the like
details.
vendor approval process, like I'm sure they have a process now, so like what does that look like?
I think it'd be a good opportunity. If he's got a good plan.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think you see anybody against it, just
Okay.
those things. Because for amount of property, what does Primex say? Does that look like? Do they have to have their own insurance as the?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever, they have to meet that threshold of whatever we require and those kinds of things, so. It's flushed out on the boarding.
Okay, yeah, I can come back I can talk to him and see, get those details and. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is special education report. Pam McDonald is in our packet. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing none. Move on. Informational items, building grounds, we have nothing on there. Do you want to talk about anything buildings and grounds or no? Okay.
We are building a school.
Perfect.
Well,
Well, that's what we're going over to
part's
Eunice on that.
nice.
But if anything else. All right, in that case, we're going over to construction management committee.
In case you didn't all know, we are building part of a new school.
A lot of a school,
So
most of a school.
maybe not right now, but I'd be curious if there's any feedback from staff or students with respect to construction, things going well, anything we have to pivot on, and it looks like as far as coming in and out of the building, everything's kind of marked appropriately. I don't see
Yeah,
any.
we have bi-weekly meetings that Mrs. Landry attends. All four of us, our facilities director, our IT director are generally all there. I probably have the worst attendance in the group, but anytime anything's come up, there have been a few issues with how workers sort of navigate the, like our employees, our construction partners, employees, they work all day, but they have breaks and they have lunch and things. So where they're going and what they're doing, we've addressed those things along the way in those bi-weekly meetings. There don't seem to be any. We've got a room that's a little too hot just because of the way it's working. The way we had to sort of section off part of the property, part of the building but it's been manageable. There's no water in a classroom. There are little things here and there. We've been able to manage them all. I haven't heard
I haven't
any
heard
any
anything, so I was
outrageous
just genuinely
problems.
curious
Yeah.
how things
How-
are
I think the
Anything?
biggest thing that I heard was that kids wanted to know more about what was going on.
They're getting curious.
And I think the principal has addressed that. They're getting information out to the students, so. I mean, it's like when the trees came down on Maple Street, it's like the kids go, where'd the trees go, you know? Yeah, so they just wanted to know, but
Great.
as far as, the meetings, just a short update, our next meeting is tomorrow. Seems like we always have one the day after a
Yeah.
board meeting.
Mhm.
We did get some information on the damage to the parking lot, and we kinda rejected their offer. It was very low.
Damage.
Yeah, what's the, I don't know what
I
it
don't
is.
remember the damage.
Oh, when they put the temporary classrooms,
Yeah.
they were parked in the new parking lot.
Oh,
It made a hole,
yeah, okay.
and so we took the pictures were taken of it and sent to the, and so we're withholding a payment, but, they came back with a low estimate of repairing it, and so there was quite a discussion on that.
I was
So-
Mark,
so-
we should have
We're
charged
going
them
So
back
the-
to
storage
them.
fees for the.
We talked about it. So the company that charged you over $800,000 to lease these modular buildings to the school district for 20 years, instead of hauling them off site the day they were
Right.
Yeah.
taken out of
Yeah.
position, they stored them on our brand new parking lot. So we're making sure that they pay a reasonable amount for the repairs that need to be done to
Plus,
that
we
asphalt.
wanna deduct the rent that they're charging us when they couldn't move their modular classroom, so anyway.
It'll all
Um,
work out.
But work on the building, as you can see, continues. I'm working on the gym area. I'm trying to close it in and trying to provide some heat in there. We'll find out tomorrow how this cold spell is affecting them, but. And they've been working on the retaining wall behind the school. We'll find out, how close that is to, completion. Guilford Well has completed the design for the new cisterns. We currently have one, which is going to be decommissioned, and 5 new ones installed. I think 4 of those are for fire and 1 for, domestic water. And Guilford is having 2 costs right now. One is for the design and implementation of the new cisterns, and the other one is to keep the current system running, so we can keep school open. So we're trying to keep those 2 bills separate, and I think the superintendent indicated perhaps keeping the one operational will come out of our current budget. We're having an addition for, along the kitchen area for the freezers, so that work is underway. I think the biggest thing right now is discussions on the renovation of the kitchen area. And they'd like to be able to get into the kitchen to start work a couple weeks before school closes. So we're trying to work out a plan that, minimize the impact to the students. But that way, they feel that they can get the kitchen all done over the summer and ready for use in the fall. So
That'd be
it's
good.
pretty aggressive, but I think that would be a major accomplishment. So that's pretty much what I have from the meeting, so.
Anybody have any questions of Eunice?
Thank you.
Thank you for attending the meetings, appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
I enjoy it. It's a good group, so.
So just around the kitchen thing, like, are they considering like bringing the food from one of the other schools? Like, didn't we do
We
that
talked about
during-
Yeah,
the
you did
possibilities.
COVID.
I think
Yeah.
we're still planning.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out how to do that.
Back to COVID plans. Which we already created once. All right, perfect. Okay, next up is SAU administration, financial reports in our packet. Heidi?
Yeah, we're looking good. We have a few places where we're in the red. But we have a lot
invited you?
that we're not.
So you're saying it's gonna balance out?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, questions of Heidi?
We're certainly not experiencing the kind of stress that we did last year. That's no understatement.
Yeah.
We are still trying to fill vacant positions with some success. You appointed an educator at your last meeting who just started this week in the special education department, which is wonderful. We added a math interventionist in around Thanksgiving in November. So we've had some success staffing certified teaching roles. We still need paraeducators and substitute teachers. That hasn't changed.
Well, I thought in the special education report, there was a shortage of special education teachers. Is that here, or?
Well, we've had a vacant special ed position here for 3 years, and we just hired a 3-day-a-week teacher for the rest of this school year, who is retired. So she's not a permanent solution, but it's the most capacity we've had in special ed now in 3 years.
So are we
It's an improvement for us.
Are we still short one?
We're short 2/5 of a person, of a position, but we're taking what we can get right now. But again, it's an improvement for us. We've gone through 2 full school years with a vacancy. So we're still looking for a permanent employee. There's another thing that's happening around us that Matt Jazokis has been really in tune with in recent months, and that is that other school districts you might read in the paper or read online from time to time are experiencing some significant budget pressures, either because they have failed to manage their budgets in previous years and are finding that they've overspent and now they have to make up for that, or simply because they've got fixed costs that are rising wildly and they're encountering some local resistance. There's been some press around what's going on in Deerfield over the last several weeks, and there are some other communities in the state. More recently, it looks like there's some disturbing news coming out of Farmington about the state of their school budget. What's happening is more of both our principals, or at least our high school principal, and the assistant superintendent are hearing from district officials in other districts talking about RIFs, reductions in force, or layoffs that they might be looking at, which in a historically tight labor market actually creates an opportunity for us to maybe fill some positions by helping solve other districts' problems, really, and through cooperation with other districts. We would seek to do that in the areas where we've been short, we've been looking. So things are up in the air, which seems to be normal in public education these days. We seem to be standing on pretty solid ground, which you may not have heard for many decades in Barnstead, but it seems to be the case right now.
Thank you. Anything else for Heidi? Tim took that over.
As he does. I was thrown off when Heidi said things were good. Not normally her job.
So we didn't get an update for technology report. So that's not there. Curriculum report. Superintendent Jazokis.
Yeah, just, you heard about this when you were at the JMA, but just to go over that, we are in the process of holding vertical alignment meetings with grades 5 through 12. We held our first one last week in our social studies department. Liz Kahn, our department head, facilitated that with the social studies teachers from Barnstead and Alton. As you know, with our grade 9 curriculum, at least set for now, and it's being revised as we go along, but now we're looking at 8, 7, 6, 5 to see the alignment there, where the gaps are, where we're missing some of the marks. And once we have that in place, then we'll start working with our K through 4 people, again, making sure that everything lines up. So eventually we'll have a K through 12 system set up for us. So social studies met next week. Luke Lafreniere, the math department chair, along with Dave Latshaw, will be facilitating the math group. So again, it'll be a similar situation. And then we'll get some dates for our science teachers. Again, we're not going to meet with our ELA because that's our literacy committee that's doing that work, and to have them meet now would be would kind of throw off what we're doing for our system-wide literacy. But again, the first group was very impressed, and they were very appreciative of the time to be able to sit down and meet. There'll be another follow-up meeting with each group, and then again during our professional development days in March and April, they'll be able to have some more follow-up. So they'll be meeting probably 4 or 5 times before the end of the school year. And so this sort of aligns with the work that they did last year with sort of creating the scope and sequences. And this is just really making sure that it's in the same format. We're looking at standards. We're developing this common rubrics and common assessments. So our grade 5 social studies will be the same grade 5 here as the grade 5 over there. And again, we'll through math and also science. So good work there. And I'm appreciative of those individuals who volunteered to facilitate for us. So system-wide literacy committee continues to meet. So we have pared down from our surveys from not only the committee themselves, but also the faculty at all 3 schools. We were at our last meeting, we took all of that data and we kind of looked at what the literacy committee was looking for and how did that align with the information that we received from the teacher surveys. Almost every sort of area, they were pretty close in nature. So it was good to see that the literacy committee and faculty were kind of on the same page with that. And so as part of that piece of it, We asked the team to break up into 3 groups. The 3 groups would be the K2 Literacy Foundation's Word Recognition group, K8 Language Comprehension, and then a 6 through 12. And so each group will then take a look at some of the programs that we have identified that have been greenlit by Ed Reports, but also the short list that the DOE has out there. So we cross-reference those groups, and so they'll be evaluating those different pieces over the next 3 months. The goal will be to come back in April and identify which ones we want to pilot. Again, our goal is to have a recommendation to the boards in May. So we're right on schedule with the outline that we put together back in September. So again, a lot of work now that we got to this point. There's a lot of work left to do to get to that piloted program. So you'll be hearing from us. We might even have some of the committee members come in and give you that piece of it. The piece that we haven't talked a little bit about is that 6 through 12. And so while we're getting closer to that K through 8, we're also sort of saying to our high school people, like, there's going to be a time where we need to sit down and talk about what's the next step. And so they're going to start looking at some of the programs that are out there so that maybe down the line we adopt at some point, but we're not there yet. So STAR testing is happening, a second round of dibbles, and we'll have some of that information either in February or March. Liza, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add for the...
Yeah, so, just, there's a lot of great work, there's a lot of homework we have currently, so, maybe this cold weather and snow will give me some time to just buckle down and do the reading, but, the energy's great with the group, and I just love the cohesion amongst the 3 schools. And Ally, the facilitator, is excellent at kind of keeping us on task, and
There's a couple of groups that get a little off task,
every
but
now
we
and
gotta-
then, yeah, but I feel like every meeting's like 2 hours, and we get a lot done during those 2 hours, and then we do have homework too that we then come back with, but it feels like now there's a level of excitement that we're almost at a point where we're gonna have something, because there's been a lot of work leading up to that, so.
And that group is going back to the schools and reporting out to the faculty as well. So I think they're feeling, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but knowing what's going on so that the faculty isn't in the dark about what's going on, so that when we get to that point of piloting and making those decisions, they're also having a voice in that.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is the superintendent's report.
I have not sent you a written report this evening, but I included 2 topics on your agenda that I'll speak to. We've had 1 meeting with the Budget Committee with 2 to go, and I would just say there have been no surprises, certainly, so far, so I don't anticipate any, having spent now a few years of January meetings with them. I think that we would have some indication if things were in any way out of the ordinary, and things do not seem out of the ordinary. Is that fair?
The only thing that hasn't been ordinary in the last, since the last couple of years, is they're going through the budget very slowly.
Slowly, yes. But they ask great questions, and
Yeah,
it's
and a
wonderful to
lot of
have
questions, but
this
very
degree of
slow.
transparency. It's great. And they're all fun to talk to, and it's pretty enjoyable, so. But there just hasn't been any indication of anything that would come back here for you to think about.
I don't
No,
know about
there
that.
haven't
Yeah.
been any issues, just.
I hear it at home.
questions.
Well, so this brings me to the
Back to
second
committee.
bullet in my report tonight, which is preparation for the annual meeting. And this is because, for 2 reasons. First, it came up at our last meeting. I had distributed a presentation I'd put together with a bunch of data around where Barnstead ranks in the state in terms of household income and per capita income and per pupil spending on education and teacher salaries and all sorts of data. The data for last year has now been released. It hadn't been the last time I saw you, so we can update that for this year. There is also a new law in effect this year that requires us on sheets of paper 18 by 24 inches in size, and the measurements are in the law,
It's very
to
precise.
post certain data at this is totally fine, it's all data we share anyway, but it's interesting.
Just gotta find the right size.
We have to make the correct size paper, but per pupil data for a certain number of years, which is something we want to share, but the law requires us to post this at the meeting, and our top 5 district level employees' salaries, which I understand, right? People.
And we do that anyway.
And we leave, that's in our annual reports anyway. We now also have to put it on a poster and maybe a couple of other things. So that's fine. It's all stuff we already share and want to. What is going to be interesting this year, though, and at your next meeting, I really want to try to bring you a draft, because I think it's going to be in our interests to do some communication about the annual meeting, the warrant articles, and the budget before March. For one thing, one of the warrant articles before you tonight for your recommendation is about expanding open enrollment so that we can go K through 6 in the alternative program. That vote under the current law requires a public hearing between 15 days and 30 days prior to the annual meeting vote. So we would be holding a public meeting for that anyway. Here's where I like this kind of thing, so for me it gets kind of interesting. There is a bill, Senate Bill 101, in front of the legislature right now that was considered in the Senate Finance Committee yesterday and was recommended ought to pass by a 6-1 vote in Senate Finance. It was sent to that committee from the Senate floor by a majority vote, ought to pass. So when you get used to the legislative process, these are indications that that bill will now go back to the Senate floor, which I think is going to happen on January 29th, and be passed, more than likely. It's already survived 2 votes. So there's an indication there of what's likely to happen. If that does happen, then Senate 101 will go to the House. Last year, the House of Representatives passed its own bill, House 741, 3 different times, which isn't possible, but what that means is it was passed on the House floor once, didn't make it through the Senate, and then the House attached the language from that bill to 2 other bills later to try to get them to the governor's desk, and the second of those was the state budget. Senate 101 and House 741 are universal open enrollment bills. Both of these bills would remove the need to hold a public hearing or to have any warrant article relating to the open enrollment program. Because under Senate 101, if it passes and the governor signs it, every school in the state will become an open enrollment school like we already are at the high school this July 1st. Every school board in the state will only have the authority to do one thing, and that is set its capacity to accept students starting next fall. So a district could decide that that number is 0. We're not taking in any students, we don't have space, or we don't want to do it, or whatever. But any district could vote, as you already do once a year at a JMA board meeting, on what your capacity will be to receive. Under the amended law, under Senate 101, all language about limiting the number of students who can go goes away. All language about legislative body votes to adopt the provisions of the law also go away. If the Senate acts on this bill around the 29th of January, and then it goes to the House, and it gets moved through the House fairly quickly, it could conceivably get to the governor's desk before March elections and annual district meetings. And again, if you get used to the legislative process and you start to read the tea leaves, that looks like the track it might be on. And the best indication of that is that yesterday, a non-germane amendment to correct what have been perceived as some flaws in the Parental Bill of Rights. If you read my report to the JMA meeting, was it last week or the week before? about some controversy about audio and videotaping at public events and that kind of thing. This has been a problem across the state that we haven't gotten drawn into, but it's been a problem in some places. So the Senate Finance Committee yesterday recommended what's called a non-germane amendment to correct that. Those changes to the Parental Bill of Rights will go into effect the day the governor signs whatever the underlying bill is that amendment was attached to. And that underlying bill is Senate 101, which creates statewide universal open enrollment. So that's an indication that this could move quickly, hit the governor's desk prior to March, and the governor gets to make her own decisions. But if Senate 101 is signed prior to annual meetings, we no longer need to have a public hearing on that warrant article. I will then recommend that you withdraw that warrant article. I still am asking you to recommend it tonight, because under the current law, that's necessary. But a lot could change between now and the annual meeting. So I think regardless of how this all plays out, there will either be a public hearing on that particular warrant article, or there should be an information night here for anyone in the community who wants to come and try to understand what the heck is going on in New Hampshire these days. Not only with our budget, but with all of this school choice, open enrollment stuff, and what it all means. So my intention is to plan for that, whether it ends up being a public hearing or not. And I think it's important. And then finally, and I'm wrapping up with this, how our proposed budget is offset by revenue is now, for the first time this year, I think something we really need to talk about. Because this open enrollment thing that 4 years ago I told you, yeah, you know, if you're willing to try it, we'll find out what happens, but no promises, is a real thing. This is happening. This is the law in New Hampshire. The Supreme Court has agreed. And now we have indications that it is about to be the law everywhere in the state, depending on what happens over the next few weeks, not even a very long time. So there's going to be a lot to process and a lot that we need to be able to simplify so that the voters can understand. We could be entering a world this coming summer and next fall where the question is not how do people feel about this program or this law. The question is, are we doing everything we can to make sure families want to send their kids to these schools? Because that's going to be the new reality for public schools in New Hampshire.
Was there a fiscal impact statement with that as well?
Not yet, but it will.
There's usually one, by the time it hits Senate, they're
Yep,
looking for it.
it will. I will predict that you're going to get language, as you often do, that it's hard to determine because it will depend on how many.
Yes, it is. It's gonna be hard to
What
determine.
boards set as their capacity and how many people participate. And if the governor has reservations, I would imagine that's what they'll revolve around. But this is where we are today.
Because as you said, the impact on the budget is gonna be the major thing, as far as, and the public will ask that question as well.
Yeah, I think the answer for us, we are in a more predictable position maybe than any district in the state with this change, because we've already been doing it for 3 years. We were the first to this table. So if in April, the joint board opens up, let's say, 30 spots in next year's 9th grade class at the high school with 5 10th grade transfers, we can anticipate, we know we'll have 26 or 28 or whatever number of returning open enrollment students. We can anticipate, maybe coming close to filling that kind of capacity. So we'll, at least on the revenue side, I've already spun up 4 years worth of what I think are pretty good predictions. On the cost side, it is hard to predict. Will there, I'm not going to name one even though it's tempting, but will another school district that maybe kids in the northern part of our towns might be able to get to easily open up capacity in its high school, and might a few of them want to go? Maybe. But again, we're in sort of this safe place to make this prediction because we're talking about a net effect. And if we're counting on 50 or 60 students coming in, the prospect of 5 or 8 or 10 even leaving is not scary, because we have students and tuition flowing in to to make up for that. It's different in other places. But for us, we're probably in the safest place in the state in terms of those kinds of concerns.
I think another important thing to point out to the voters is that we haven't, now we're talking about the high school, but we haven't really made any significant cuts, even though our enrollment has been decreasing. So by taking in these students, we're really not adding costs in staff to the high school. I mean, it's good, it's good for us.
Well, and I totally agree, of course, Mrs. Landry, and the reason I use that example of about 30 ninth graders and maybe 5 10th graders is because we've already done our research and our analysis that we think that's about the break-even point for us, where if we added about 30 students every year, we probably don't have to expand staff at the high school. Worst case, maybe a position, 2, but nothing significant. When you get to 40, 50 students here, now you're looking at a total of 200 open, we would need more teachers. So that's, I think, the trick over the next few years for the joint board and for district leadership is figure out the right number, where we're filling capacity without expanding cost significantly. And that's, again, because we've been doing this for a few years, it feels like we're a little bit ahead. And we're in a safer position moving into this new reality than maybe some who have been waiting and, I don't know, imagining that it wasn't going to happen, even though I think it's been pretty clear across the state where we were headed.
Isn't the law wasn't it going to also impact elementary and middle school?
Yeah, the open enrollment statute applies to K through 12, all levels of
So
education.
when you're talking numbers, again, in budget, how will that impact like BES and Alt Central, those places that are probably already have maximum kids?
So 2 different conversations. The one we'll have here is about a school that does not have excess capacity, right? So another day, far in the future maybe, but right now, we have plenty of kids residing in Barnstead to fill this school. Alton is under capacity at Alton Central School, but for other reasons might choose not to open up capacity for in-person open enrollment at the elementary level. I personally am not an advocate for elementary grade open enrollment programs, but that's just me, right? School boards are the decision makers, and in other districts, they'll have other opinions too. There are some good arguments. If I were in, I'll use an example for this one because it's easier. If I were in Concord, and I knew that a lot of people who live outside of Concord drive there for work every day, and I had elementary schools that were under capacity, if I were a board member in Concord, I might consider casting a vote to open up some capacity in those elementary schools, knowing that parents are driving in and out of there every day anyway. Out here in a more rural area where many people are leaving Barnstead to go to work, we don't seem like that kind of community. Plus, we have a school that's already full or overfull. So I can see why some districts might do it. And then the other way that I think some districts will view this open enrollment thing, anticipating if it happens that the law passes and gets signed, is for staff who at some schools are offered bringing their children to the school where they work as a benefit. In other districts are allowed to pay tuition to bring their children to the school where they're. Some boards might say, we're going to open up open enrollment seats. And our criteria, and we don't know how this kind of thing will play out under state board rules until it happens, but under the criteria that if you work here, your kids can come here,
We've had that before.
that might happen, right? That might work. And you might see a lot of districts trying that at the beginning of this. We'll have to wait and see.
I think Alton actually did that at one time.
And we've
Yeah.
talked about it in Alton in recent years too. It's always controversial. Because when you do it for employees, unless you want to charge the individual people, the employees' tuition, it's easy to have some taxpayer blowback about that. Is this something we we should be paying for, and then you get into a conversation about it being an employment benefit. But under a law like universal open enrollment, you send a tuition invoice to the town where they live for 80% of their per pupil cost, and off you go.
Getting back to the annual meeting, and I talked to Jason briefly about this, but I'd like to get something out to the town meeting about the information that you had put together, you know, what's our tax rate compared to the states, you know, or other towns our size.
Yeah, condensed version of what you put
Yeah,
together.
very condensed.
Very
because
condensed,
I think
I know.
a lot of that would just,
Because we can put a pamphlet on the tables out here, right?
Sure can.
I think a lot of that would just go over their head, but I think, but get it out early.
Yep.
So the same people often come to our meeting and they'll have some good information coming in, so. Because I think a lot of people pick up at the table when they come in, but don't have a chance to read it or, you know.
Because I'm anticipating what's likely to happen without being able to guarantee what's going to happen. I can put this together by your next meeting. Hey, we talked last month about maybe you seeing a draft and having a chance to talk a little bit before we're out sharing information in public. I think that doing that in February puts us on the right timeline.
The other thing to think about for our school district meeting, and I don't know if Milestone should do it or I should do it, but having a good update on the construction. And we talked about having some kind of a tour before the district meeting.
Whichever one's a better speaker out of them, not the other guy.
Huh? I'm sorry.
They'll do great. Yes.
We have one that spoke, don't have him speak again.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
You sure?
Yeah.
I think it'd be great actually if it was somebody from the company and you speaking together, if you went back and forth though, because you've been on there and experience. I think that'd be great.
Because I think the people that I've met in the meetings, you know, the guy that's really on site, I think, every day, is really focused on schedules and making sure everything's working. But the representative from Milestone, very good speaker, very organized. Yeah.
Yeah, Matt Bowyer.
And Doug usually comes too from, so, yeah,
Buddy Doug.
yeah.
Yeah, when we did public tours prior to Thanksgiving, were they all here? I think.
Yep.
Yeah,
Matt, Brett, and, yep,
they were all here. We
One took the
had a
tour
bunch of
the
people
wrong
taking
way, but,
groups.
you know.
Yeah.
that's the engineer.
It's engineer.
So we haven't talked about this yet with them. You know, when we did it the day before Thanksgiving, that was a work day on the site, but not for all the subs. So it was an easy day. We were all scheduled to work. They were scheduled to work, but a lot of people weren't.
Yeah.
For leading into March, one option I haven't even talked to these folks about, or anyone from Milestone, but if we could get a few people in on a Saturday, it's hard to predict how long the town meeting is going to take. But if people were leaving, because it starts in the morning, sometime in the early afternoon, and we were offering tours of the site that afternoon, that's 2 weekends prior to our annual meeting.
But I think, for me, what's gonna be important coming up into March is to see what's being done for renovations within the existing building. I mean, everybody sees the massive construction out here.
It's hard to miss.
But even on the tours that we went, you know, seeing all the different locations that are being worked on. But I think a lot of work inside the building is occurring, so.
Another thing, and I know you know this, but not necessarily everyone else does, Eunice. In the old lobby right now, there's a temporary wall concealing a bunch of construction work. But before both the annual town meeting and the annual district meeting in March, that'll all be opened. There will be 2 brand-new bathrooms open to the public and 5 new office spaces open and being used by our staff right there, that every single person walking in will walk past. So there will at least be something that we can, and we've done it before actually. We've come in, I think, to share space needs information at the town meeting. prior to our annual meeting. So we'll be able to figure something out.
I think the more information we can get out,
Yeah.
because we're gonna have personally, I think we have a tough sell this year. I mean, it's important, but it's not gonna be easy, so.
Any other questions of the superintendent? All right. Preparations. That brings us up to the warrant articles.
So you need a motion.
What's that?
Do you need a motion?
I'll make a
Each.
motion that we
Yes.
recommend, Article 2, which is our, gross budget.
Or you want to do them one at a time?
Sure.
Okay. Give a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Discussion on that? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Okay.
I'll make a motion that we recommend Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, and Article 6 that all have to do with increases in contracts either for the teachers at the high school or the paraprofessionals at the high school.
Second?
Discussion? All right, hearing none, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
I'll make a motion that we recommend Article 7, Article 8, and Article 9.
Second?
Discussion on those articles. Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous, the articles pass. Next on the hit list, athletic discussion with,
I'm back again.
you are back again, Mr. Christie, so athletic director, you have the floor.
Sure. First thing I wanted to mention to all of you is, not only thank you for the approval of football, but I think even the idea of let's have a public hearing, get everyone in one space. I don't know about you, but it was great to hear from adults, but also the kids, talking about what football means to them. And I just think it was an important part of that whole process. So thank you for that. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Barnstead kids. This is a very interesting time of year for us because we don't have a gym here. So we have kids waiting to go on a bus to go to ACS, to Prospect, just for home practices, never mind games and all of that. Those kids show up to our high school. There's never been an issue. Now that I say that, something's gonna happen. But they show up, they're great. They help me set up the gym, put out chairs, and so just like a kudos to the kids here for doing a great job with that. 2 Mondays ago, we rolled out the academic probation protocol from our handbook at both middle schools. So that's now happening here at Barnstead. We're in week 2 of that, and we do have some kids on there. I've already spoken to some parents, and we haven't quite got to the point where we've had to hold anyone out yet. Hopefully that doesn't happen on Monday, but not really any pushback. I think everyone understands, and we'll work through the first couple of weeks here to make sure everyone is treated fairly as we fully implement this. But we tested the system. I had the admin here review it. The names all looked accurate, so I think that whole process is now working. And then same thing with behavior. I had a chance to talk to Howie and Kristen a little bit about, can we use athletics as a positive tool to, help create better behavior. So I think we have a good rhythm for how we're going to handle that moving forward at this school and also over at Alton. One last update before I actually get into what I'm talking about here. We have a student athlete leadership team at the high school level. I'd been asked about, could we do this at the middle school level by someone from Alton. We are reviewing this. I actually have the kids in SALT at the high school drafting a plan that will allow us to figure out how we implement this at the middle school. It won't be a this year thing. The idea is to let's build the infrastructure, make it work out any kinks, and then kind of roll it out. And basically, that would be 7 to 15 kids that, want to be leaders in the school, and, we help them through through that process and what the expectations are, and roll that out at each of the middle schools. So that is currently ongoing.
And I would just say, because my daughter's on SAU, and loves it. It's been very helpful for her in getting involved, and James does push the kids to be leaders and talks about leadership and those kinds of things. So it's been a great program, and I do hope that it continues and we're able to support it, because just creating more leaders, it's been firsthand knowledge of it. It's just been really, really good.
Yeah, thank you for that. One of my most favorite things is being at an event and I turn around and I see a kid picking up garbage out of the bleachers, and I'm like, that's a SALT kid. Like, not asked, nothing, just wants to help out our staff and make sure that the place is cleaned up, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do with that group. So what I'm here for is to continue the conversation about potentially combining middle school athletics with Barnstead and Alton. So, what was it, a couple months ago, I came in and just talked about this briefly at the JMA board meeting. The recommendation was made to separate it and talk about it at each of the individual boards, which makes total sense. There is not a need to do this broadly. We do have a need in some individual sports. So, for example, girls soccer. When I first got here last year, we were looking at Alton having 4 kids and Barnstead having 9. That was a simple solution to the problem. You know, we could have had them play co-ed. No one really wants to do that. They had actually played co-ed the year prior in Alton. So that was forced on us, but it's worked out great. Feedback's been awesome. Really no issues with logistics. And quite honestly, I have not heard a piece of negative feedback about the combo of the girls' soccer team. We do this with wrestling currently. And we have varying levels of participation. Right now, we're a little light in Alton, heavy in Barnstead, but those adjust over time. But it makes total sense in wrestling because we only have a couple coaches. They all can work together in one space and make each other better. And so that's worked out really well with wrestling. And then we also do it with cheerleading for a similar reason we do it with wrestling. You can teach things at the same time. It creates some continuity from the younger group up into the high school. And again, we've had pretty limited issues from a logistical standpoint, and had some great success. What I'm looking at, and as a real kind of view of our athletics here, is what does our pipeline look like? We're doing so many great things with our facilities and the whole athletic program and our coaching staff. When I start to look down that pipeline, what am I seeing from the kids? And I believe combining athletics to tier current skill levels gives us the opportunity to produce better results for everyone, not just the A players. This is the same for B, C, and D, whatever we want to call them. Because one of the issues you run into coaching at this level, and I run into it even at the high school level, I'll use softball as an example. I'm trying to teach 5 girls the intricacies of how we turn 2 or do this pickoff play, or hey, this is the fine tuning of your mechanics to your swing. And then in the next moment, I'm teaching a kid how to hold a bat. And when you have that large variance of skill set, it's very difficult to make sure you're spending the appropriate amount of time with either one of those. You're either holding back your top level kids, or you're not giving enough attention to the kids who need a little bit more attention. So if you think about taking the 2 schools and have, let's say, our A players, now that talent disparity goes like this, and that coach can focus on how do I get this kid ready to go to high school next year or the year after and be a contributor early. The B-level kids are still in this stack of talent disparity, but it's different than what we're showing the A-level kids. This may be more about skill development. This doesn't mean we don't want them to be ready to participate at the high school level. They just need a little bit more work to get themselves there, and we have a coach that can focus solely on that to bring their skill level up. And same thing with C, or whether we call it a 5th and 6th grade team or a developmental team, whatever the words are, doesn't really matter. We can tier their competition, we can tier their coaching, we can tier their practicing to produce a better result for all of those kids, which ultimately for me, as I look as we're growing athletics and want to be successful long-term, it creates a far better funnel for these kids coming through and increases their chance of success. And so from a pure philosophical point of view, it makes sense. I mean, if you look at any major league program, right, like any sport, pick it, they all have a tiered system that allow people to work up through that system. We would do the same thing here. This is not meant to take away opportunities. We would make sure that there is some tier of a team that is available to every kid. Because there's some kids who don't want to even play in high school. They just want to be on the team now because it's social and they have fun. We could create an avenue for that kid to be able to do that here, play appropriate competition. At the same time, you know, I'm not going to use any names, but in soccer this year, we were super heavy at one school with 8th graders and very light with 8th graders at the other school that had a little bit harder go this year. Those 2 or 3 kids, if we could have taken them and put them on the other team with all of those other 8th graders, would have had a much better experience and developed far more. And then we could have focused on the other school, and it's less about winning and losing. They're a little bit younger. Let's focus on real skill development to get those kids ready for next year and the year after. Now, there's a lot of details to figure out with all of this, and I have a pretty good roadmap already kind of laid out if we were to move forward. Budget's a consideration. I've done a fair amount of the math on it. I'm actually not concerned about that. We might actually save some money as opposed to spending more. But, you know, how do you have tryouts? How do you pick your coaches? All these things need to be in place to make sure that we have a true formal process, so there's no consideration of, oh, that kid made it because they're from Barnstead or Alton or whatever it may be. And I have some ideas around how we would manage that. But before I stop, I've built a whole career building teams for success, but more importantly, finding ways to take young athletes and get them to a point to reach their goals, whether that's playing in college, playing in high school, whatever it is, and feel like I personally have a pretty good pulse on how we do that. And if I'm going to apply that in this role at these schools, this is the way to do it to produce the best results for our kids in our district to perform at a high school level.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I coached down here, you know, all the way up through Lane's 8th grade and still do tennis at the high school. You have a bunch of kids come out in middle school and, you know, you don't want to make cuts, so you're keeping a few extra there, but then on a basketball team, they don't get a chance to play because they don't have skill level. And so I've always been an advocate of an A team, B team, if there's enough level for another level, because you can't focus on, you know, because the seasons are so short sometimes, or limited even practice time with no gym or anything else, that you're like, well, then you feel bad for this kid's not going to get what they need, and they're not going to get out there to play because you're still in some competition. So, you know,
Are both schools athletics we offer to grades 5 through 8? Is that
Yes.
consistent?
Yep,
For
they're
every
both 5
sport?
through 8 for every sport.
Okay.
Yep.
I know you mentioned having kind of obviously budget in mind. I'm trying to visualize transportation and how fun that could be, trying to orchestrate this group of kids is going to this school, this could, you know, the back and forth.
So to answer that, we've kind of talked about, could we have an athletic bus? And that's all that bus does at the end of the day is grab kids from one school, bring them here, grab those kids, bring them back. Could be a possibility with this that I think fits within our budget. If we use our current structure, we do this right now where the bus, let's say we're going to Kingswood. The bus is going to come here first, grab these kids. On the way through, grab the kids in Alton, and then go up to Kingswood for an away game, for example. So we work with the bus company to have it make the most sense of which way the bus is traveling to scoop the kids up.
Because normally we wouldn't pay for transportation for practice, but wouldn't we have to do that now?
We would, because we would ultimately pick a location.
Right.
Where
So
those
someone's
kids
traveling and we're
practice.
combining.
This is assuming practice is happening directly after school, which in some seasons and some coaches, that's what they do. If practice is, you know, 4 o'clock or later,
Then it's more on the
then it's on
parents,
the parents to
so
get
depending
their
on the
kids
time.
there.
Okay, just something to be mindful of where
For sure.
we might have some savings in some pockets. There's bound to be an extra cost just with that piece.
For sure, and the logistical part is a whole separate animal too.
Yeah.
Although in fairness, I struggle to even say this out loud, First Student's been good this winter so
Yeah.
far.
Yep.
Fall was very rough. This winter, knock on wood, has been good so far.
Yeah, yeah, and just obviously we have vans if they're not in use, maybe, obviously probably not for a game, but you
Just
know, bring
getting a
just
couple
5 kids to
kids.
practice, maybe that's an option.
Well, we own 4 vans in the district, so.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, we used them once
Which
or
we did
twice for
vote on to,
soccer.
we could share.
And
And
we
then-
utilize them quite a bit now,
Right.
for the combined team. So like Jess would take her Barnstead kids at the end of the day here, take the van up to Prospect for the games
Okay,
or whatever,
awesome.
practice, whatever it was.
Perfect. Sorry, I wrote down a few, I just have one more
No,
question.
go for it. That's the whole
When you
point
were
of this.
talking about the tiered, and I appreciate that, and I think that makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of opportunity for kids no matter what level you're at. So I appreciate you explaining it the way that you did. So that, I'm just gonna use basketball as an example. Let's say you have 4 teams, right?
Sure.
Just because we kind of have 2 and 2. So if you've got 4 basketball teams, and you've got your core A team and maybe a B team, then you've got a development, have you explored, will there be an opportunity for those kids that are less developed to play games? Like, I'm trying to think of who will we find for them to play when most schools carry, say, an A and a B team only?
Yeah. So we would go through and basically pick traditional teams that we know their level of competition. So I don't necessarily want to call any specific schools out, but school X we play, and every time our B team plays them, we win by 30. Well, that's maybe a team that our C-level team can go and play. Our A-level group is now going to be better than anything we've had, so we may actually have to go find some stronger competition in other
Okay.
areas. So we would go through and make sure each of those teams has games. They may not all have 15 games.
Yeah.
I think it would be tiered, because I would argue your C and D level teams should be playing less games and practicing more. And doing more like modified scrimmages where a coach is interacting with them as it's going, and we would find schools
Yep.
to do that with, but also play traditional games as well.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially at this age group.
You gotta have some fun.
You
if
gotta
wanna
have some
compete.
fun, and they wanna
Yes.
compete, so I just wanna make sure we don't lose
I think you
sight
can find other
of
schools
that
that would-
opportunity.
I think you find other schools, once you start doing, would jump on.
Well, I
And
know
it's usually
last
smaller
year,
schools.
Yeah.
We found like
Alton
Farmington or.
did that with, because I was talking to Jay about it, and
With
he,
basketball, yeah.
with his like B-level team, they didn't have like a traditional schedule, but he found other community teams,
Yeah.
sometimes almost like rec type level,
He also
but to
had them
create the right,
scrimmage themselves, but brought in a referee and made it real. It wasn't, it was meant to be a game, but it was the same group of 11, 12 kids.
You could still do, like, you could even do a jamboree, depending on different levels, at least, because they're gonna do probably that lower level limited games, like you said, but if you do a jamboree at the end for that limited level, there's all kinds of things you can do.
yeah. So I mean, all of my kids have played sports, and I'm 100% bought in on it, but I definitely see how it improves. I guess I just wanna bring what I've seen as a positive that's kind of outside of athletics is and I see this because I spent a fair amount of time in the high school, and so like I've seen the cheer practices and it just different, and I've been to like the girls combined soccer teams, and the level of community it's creating amongst parents, amongst the students, like is really impactful, because then they go to the high school, and we've always talked about like we're Prospect, we're not Barnstead, we're not Alton, we're Prospect once we get there, but this is like creating that before they even get there. And so we have seen, I'll use girls basketball for an example, but like currently there's not a girl from Alton on the high school JV or varsity team. And that's a result of Barnstead for years having a very strong program and Alton not. And it's not that Alton didn't have girls that could have performed had they been developed that way. So when you think about things like that, or there's soccer, boys soccer, there was one school that was like beating everybody in sight, and one that like was struggling to score a goal. One person's getting like this type of experience, and somebody else is struggling to, versus if you can put them together, they're all gonna rise if they're with the right group. So I think it's really important, but for people that are like, well, we're not involved in athletics, or why is this focus? I just think for people that don't have that experience, it's more than athletics. And if you go to the games, you see that, and you see that in the parent interactions, you see it in the teammates interactions. So
And
Well,
it
see
is
more kids
something
come up.
that's unique to us, right? Like, these kids go from opponents to teammates
right.
and then have to perform like instantly at the high school level. So taking that and making that happen in 5th grade, just camaraderie wise, but also you think about, like, I have a varsity coach at the high school. For him to have an impact at both middle schools for a sport is very difficult. He has to split his time and go here, there. Now we say, hey, your A-level kids are here at this school. Like, their direct interaction can happen with that group to kind of start that funnel even a little bit earlier, and have it kind of even get down into the B-level group as well, where you're getting a lot more interaction with the varsity and JV coaches at the middle school level, because it's an easier point of access because it's not all spread out.
That's this is kind of off topic, but similar to what you were saying. So I know some coaches have taken the opportunity to invite, like, hey, middle school, come up to, and that's such a big deal for the kids.
Yeah.
Just food for thought. I would love every varsity high school coach, regardless of what sport it is, to take the opportunity to invite your middle school teams to come do that. I just think a little bit more consistency would go a long way, because the kids love it, and then I think some other kids might feel left out when they hear it's happening and they're not invited.
I totally agree. I was actually having this conversation today. It was not even about this. I'm in year 2. I think I have my feet underneath me. We got everything settled. My next goals for me and the athletic department is that. Like, how do we start to get down into the middle schools, or even further, thinking about the rec programs, getting involved? My expectation of a varsity coach is you own that sport in this district. So, like, what are the things you're doing? Because, again, I'm staring down a pipeline. I feel really good about a few age groups, and then I'm like, man, are we gonna be humming and ready to go, and then be like, man, we don't have the kids. Like, the kids don't match what we're doing from an athletic standpoint, and I want to make sure we don't run into that problem
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 years
Yeah,
down
and I'm
the
not
road.
blaming any current coach, please know that.
No,
I
not at
think
all.
they may not even know that they're able to do that, or who to reach out to do that, but that would be a great opportunity, especially as we talk more about this.
And right now, it's on them. Some are better than others.
Yeah.
It'll be on me and the athletic department. It'll be an expectation of
That'd be great.
their employment, so.
Yeah, and it works well with tennis. We invited the middle school up, and we did drop-in
Yeah.
tennis this summer.
So
And when I was coaching basketball, same thing. We went to the high school, and yeah, it was good
some
times.
programs do it, and then I heard some kids kind of
Well,
felt
I
left
think
out.
he's saying it's been on the coaches, so it depends on which coaches motivated or.
So we're in a unique current space, right, without a gym here, but we will have a gym. We will have a beautiful gym. How will
Yeah.
you determine, and this isn't a now, I don't need an answer now. I'm just trying to think about how will you determine, like, what's your home court, or will we share a home court? Because technically, you've got ACS kids. They might want to have a home game at ACS, or
Yep.
vice versa.
So once we're on equal playing ground, we
Yeah.
figured that out. So, like, we would figure out practices, split between the 2 spaces, or we may say, all girls basketball's in this gym, all
Yep.
boys is in this one. But then games, we would try to kind of, because I like having them at the high school too. So we'd still have a
Yeah.
couple at the high school, have some here, have some there.
Okay.
Figure that out. When we get outdoors, to me, it's which space is the best option in terms of its quality and availability and all of that. But I think the gym's probably a little more special, right, to like play there, where
Yeah.
soccer field maybe not as much.
Yeah.
But we would work through that to create some equal opportunity.
Perfect. Yeah.
But ultimately have like a home field, and we would we would just figure that out and share it ahead of time and maybe even do a
Yeah.
rotation.
Sorry,
like
I
we-
know we're thinking,
No, but it's all
getting ahead of
things,
myself, but I'm just like,
when
I
I
feel like it's
first-
important to some kids, and especially as this gym opens up. I can't speak on behalf of an ACS parent, but I think it'll be important to some kids to feel like they have a home game and not just every game's at ACS or the high school or vice
Sure.
versa, so.
agreed.
What are you looking from us?
So that's a good question. I mean, we all met and it was recommended we kind of separate and talk individually. I have not spoken to Alton yet, so that's next part of this. I kind of have a deadline. In March 23rd, I go to a middle school meeting where we create our schedules for the fall. If we were going to do this for 2026, I would prefer to not go make a bunch of schedules and then have to mess everyone's schedules up afterwards. So, not to say we have to make the decision by that actual day, but somewhere in that time frame, if it's something we're interested in doing, would be beneficial.
So by having James come and speak with you tonight, we do have the ability to have him go talk to the Alton School Board separately, as everyone wanted, and then we will see you together as a joint board after the March elections, but before the middle school scheduling meeting among ADs, if this is something that you collectively want to act on, which I think is how you want to do it. I don't think that two separate boards, without getting back together, want to make a decision, right? But I think you wanted a chance to kind of process this separately. So you now have processing time. We won't revisit this for, you can bring it back as a sort of a further discussion item on your next agenda. But you have an opportunity to go back to the joint board when both boards have done this.
Yeah, what about, can I make a motion to see who, or,
Make a motion that we're in favor of it as
The-
long as Alton wants to. do it.
Yeah, as
Like on
long
our side, we
as-
need that kind of motion, right?
yeah, as long as Alton.
So
Yes.
motion.
So
would
we
be-
can tell them, basically?
Yes.
Yeah.
Motion would be
Yeah,
that.
that you can tell them that this is where we landed.
Yeah, and I maybe even add to that, them, and one more conversation with more detail from me. Like, here is like the plan and what we're, I think would make sense, right?
Yeah, I think the motion is contingent upon Alton's support and, seeing some additional
A
details.
final review and,
Yeah.
yep.
But just to show if we're in support of it.
I agree.
Got a second on that?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Unanimous.
Thank
Cool.
you.
You have work ahead of you.
Yes. At some point, I'll stop coming here and asking for things, I promise. I probably have one more in a month, though, but that one's super easy, and that'll be at the JV. It's about a different sport that everyone's asking about that I think we have an opportunity to do at zero expense. So,
You like zero expense.
now that I said this on here, I'm gonna get notes about it, I'm sure.
Tune in.
Yes, tune in and you'll find
At
out more.
7:09 PM on January.
Thank you, everyone, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. Thank
All right,
you.
thank you very much. Any questions of the AD while he's here, of anything else you might have questions of him? No? Okay. Seeing none. Next up, we have policies, a second read.
A motion for the second reading and adoption of JICL-R.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes. None on personnel. Next up, we have our second public input, which is the same criteria as the first public input. We'll all stare at one spot. Okay. Closing second public input.
I do not.
Wow, we do not need a non-public. Does anybody on the board need a non-public in particular? Okay. Future agenda items, I mean, we're still talking the budget, we're still talking about getting ready for our
Meeting.
March meeting, pamphlets, probably either we're talking about we're pulling a warrant article, or but we're still gonna have either a informational meeting or a public hearing meeting, depending on how these things turn out.
And there'd be time to set that at that February 18th meeting.
We still probably won't know on February 18th, but
Wow.
we'll know 4 weeks more than we know now.
Okay.
But either way, we're gonna do some sort of, either it's an informational meeting or not.
It won't be
Right,
over,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, either way, we're gonna have a meeting, so.
but we'll see on February 18th.
But we should do the same.
We've got to
announcement,
prepare either way,
posting.
right? You know,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so it doesn't really change too
Yeah.
much.
Okay.
Can we have an update on just busing as a whole, how things are going at that meeting?
You want it right now? We
Yeah.
can give it to you right now.
If, I don't wanna put anyone.
How
on
often are the
spot.
buses late these days?
Very little.
Very
Everything
little.
worked out as
Yeah.
we hoped.
They got fully staffed.
Yep.
They got everybody trained and licensed.
Great.
And we hired 2 monitors to deal with some pretty serious behavioral concerns early in the year.
Okay.
And across the board, all of those conditions have improved. I also think a lot of parents have downloaded the app. So if a bus happens to be running a minute or
Yeah.
5 or 7
Yeah.
late, we're not getting phone calls because they can see where the bus is.
That's helpful. That was a great idea, so thank you for doing that. The monitors, are they continuing to be in place, or was that just like a temporary thing, or how?
No, we're still using them.
Yeah.
They move around to different bus routes depending sort of on what's going on. The drivers and we don't even, unless they're talking to Howie, which I think they've done from time to time, but I don't think it's an everyday thing. They kind of manage that.
Yeah,
You know, drivers tell dispatch, hey, I'm having a problem, can I get a monitor for a couple of days?
Yeah.
And they do it.
I fully support that. I think
Yeah.
every.
I mean,
It's
you
a
can,
lot on
you
the
can
bus
see,
driver to have
you know,
to
Brandy, it's
respond.
not something that we included in our budgeting for transportation, but you
Yeah.
can see in our financial statements that we can support it this
Yeah.
year, so
I think it's
let's get
important.
things working well and under control.
Great.
Interesting question, because I think the assumption is we're talking about the students, but do these monitors ever have to speak to the bus driver and say, if you no, because sometimes teachers, we have to say to them, if you changed your behavior, it would impact the children. So,
Yeah, I don't know. It certainly seems possible, but I don't know. I will say, in one situation, we had to sit down one morning with one of the drivers, and she hadn't done anything wrong. It was more about something that was going on with a student and figuring out the best way to address it. And it was one of their new drivers, newly trained, and on the route, and she was wonderful. Like, I couldn't have been more impressed.
We may have asked her if she was
If
interested.
if she wanted to do something in between the morning and afternoon bus routes, we had a space in the school for her. Yeah, she was great. So, I just think,
I didn't
you know,
mean that as a criticism of the driver, but it's like a teacher.
Sometimes they need skills
If
as
they
well.
just change the way they interact, it's gonna make a big difference.
Or just being aware of how you can best support that child's needs so that, yeah,
things seem
great,
pretty decent across the board. Certainly much, much better.
thank you.
Future agenda items, like to get either some sort of report or analysis or evaluation for elementary school and high school, since we implemented the deans, how that's been helpful and impactful. Brandy
Thank you.
kind of talked about it last time, so if we can get some sort of update, we put the money into it and think it's working, but we just like to hear.
Yeah, I think one of your questions was,
Yeah.
Yeah, she asked me, yeah.
can
That's
we
what I got from Brandy.
consolidate or,
Yes, consolidate, yeah, still needed, just kind of where we're at with it.
Sure.
Another thing up there, anything else on future items?
No, but thank you for remembering that.
Yep, I try.
Great job.
Other business, I just say is, yeah, because I'm the legislative chair for my association. There's a lot of bills out there, a lot of school stuff, still talking about only 12 superintendents and be run by the counties, which we're dead set against it. We're gonna testify. But as you will see, there's also no one out there trying to sneak back in, tax caps. That is out there, which, if that went through, it'd be very difficult for schools or towns to even run with, being forced upon legislator of those tax caps, because it's arbitrarily being set by them. So hopefully that doesn't go through, it's local control,
Right.
so, but,
as far as
There's
the
a bill
next
there.
meeting, we'll also be done with the budget committee, so we'll have information on where they stand, so.
perfect. In that case, case, next meeting date is February 18th. With that, I'll accept a motion to,
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
I,
Aye. Brad, we're adjourned.
Is the option still to have a Chromebook available still?
Absolutely. Just
Okay.
need to know that you want it.
I did tell Miss Borelli, she
Did
was,
you email her?
I told her at the meeting.
Oh.
She wrote it down.